I would have to say I've reservations about some aspects of this bill in general. I have to say that COVID and the experience of how it played out in the media was a very enlightening and salutary experience for me. It was quite a strange thing to see medical doctors, people who head up schools of or centres, research centres within universities, and I'm thinking in particular, I suppose, of Professor Carl Heenahan, who's a British academic, and much of what he said, or not much of what he said, some of what he had to say was being flagged up on Facebook as being a sort of unorthodox, untrusted, not to be accepted because somebody somewhere determined that it was not in accordance with the prevailing orthodoxy. And I suppose it may well be that what he had to say didn't accord with the orthodoxy, but that tendency is frightening, because I would wonder how much expertise whoever determined that his posts were somehow dangerous had in medicine, I mean, and in evidence-based medicine, which was his particular field. And I have to say, it made me very, very uncomfortable, this labelling of stuff. I mean, surely everything that you hear, everything you read is to be taken with a grain of salt. I mean, even among medical professionals, I mean, you know, there's a reason people sometimes get a second opinion, you know, not to say that the first opinion they received was somehow that the person who gave it lacked bona fides or anything like that, but opinions differ. And is that not the nature of life? Is that not the nature of discourse, that opinions differ? Yet we seem to be obsessed with this idea that there has to be one truth and we all have to share it, and if we don't share it, society will fall apart, so we need to banish those who don't share our views and who have improper thoughts. You know, and it goes back to, I think, a darker time in Irish history, a darker time in world history. But it seems to me that that's where we're going. I mean, there were fact checkers. There was one particular outlet in Ireland who were obsessed with fact checking. I mean, they'd set the fact checkers on you, and it was like, oh my God, the fact checkers. But like, they were a media outlet that were supported almost exclusively from government funding at the time. And I mean, and a government official could contact them. And if somebody disputed anything that a government official said, they could be contacted and they'd be doing their fact-checking, and it became a real witch hunt. And I suppose witch hunts are fine. Everyone's free to become a witch if they want to, and, you know, we all have our views on hunting. But when it's state-sponsored, when it's carried out by an outlet that's paid by the state to enforce a message that the state wants you to accept and that you can't question, then I think it becomes a source of worry, to me at least. And that's a worry that I have about this bill. I mean, there's this vetting of researchers provision in it, which seems to be a very strange delegation of powers. And there's also this sort of almost accredited fact-checkers provision. It's also, I think, in section 37 of the bill, which seems to me to be, you know, are we now to have sort of vigilante groups who are going to police the internet, and they'll be accorded a special badge by Commission Man? I mean, I suppose that's a very dystopian way of looking at it, but I just fear that that's the road we're going down. And I mean, the idea, I mean, I suppose it started, like, as I say, during COVID, and this flagging content, and you know, eminent professors who didn't fully accept what other eminent professors were saying, or more importantly, what ministers for health were saying. And I'm not, by the way, talking about an Irish context. This is beyond Ireland, and it's a much bigger context, but suddenly became pushed to the margins, to be distrusted. And that's worrying, but equally, you know, at the start of the Ukraine war, there was one narrative only. You had to buy into it. Just I suppose we couldn't afford the narrative, it now looks like, from what the government are doing. Or actually, no, we're going to differentiate between those who fled Ukraine and have temporary protection at one point in time, and those who come now and have temporary protection. It seems rather odd philosophically to me, but the government, I'm sure, will explain it in due course. But the point I was making about the Ukraine war was close to the start of it. The European Commission, led by a former German Minister for Defence, no less, announced that certain outlets were to be banned. RT, it used to be, I think Russia Today was banned now. I have to say it didn't affect me in my life in any way. I've certainly never gone to Russia Today to look for the truth on anything like that. I may have, you know, if you flick through television channels and you're in a hotel, Russia Today comes on, I may have seen it in that context. But the idea, but I certainly wouldn't be going there to discern what the truth is. But I'm not sure I'd be going to any particular media outlet to discern the truth. I mean, you inform yourself in a variety of sources and make up your mind, do you not? I mean, so Russia Today was banned by a former German defence minister, and that made me very uncomfortable. I have to say that the idea of a German defence minister deciding what I could and couldn't view on my television if I choose to is not it's not a society that I want to live in. I mean, I'm not saying I want to look at Russia Today. I could care less whether it's there or whether it's gone. But the fact that she's telling me what I can and can't look at is worrying, and I think is moving us in a particular direction. And the direction is, of course, further from plurality of views, plurality of opinion, and towards the idea that there is one universal truth that we must all accept and march together towards this common nirvana that awaits us all. That's worrying. So I would have a lot of reservations about this bill. I accept that the government have that it's based on EU legislation, but the fact that it's based on EU legislation doesn't make it any less. Doesn't give me much consolation, given the makeup of the current Commission and the political impetus, and many of the complete lack of any transparency in some of the decision-making processes there, and the fact that she was so willing to hide, essentially, communications with various companies from people who wanted to investigate it. I think there was a legitimate issue in determining it. Lastly, I suppose, and it's a lot closer to home, I mean, there was this schmozzle between the Department of Justice and X. Now, I mean, you know, which of them do you believe? But nevertheless, there is this the minister came out and announced something, and X said, well, that's untrue. So somebody somewhere made a mistake, and maybe down to human error, but like, you know, is the Minister for Justice to be flagged as somebody whose pronouncements are not to be trusted on social media? I don't think that she should be, for what it's worth. But nevertheless, I don't think there's been any... she hasn't withdrawn the accusation that she made. There is a suggestion somewhere that some people have preferred routes to social media companies and contact them to get, I think a former local politician in Ireland announced on television that she had got onto someone she knew on Twitter and they had dealt with something for her. Again, are we to have a preferred grouping of people who police what's said on behalf of the rest of us? You know, these are all potentially dark avenues that we can go down, and I think we need to be very, very careful about this bill, because, I mean, it is fundamentally about censorship. And of course, censorship is fine when all you're saying is you can't say something that's untrue. But, you know, saying that the Earth orbited the Sun was a very dangerous thing to say at one point, and we shouldn't ever go back to a time when people are penalised or distrusted for saying things like that.